the captain called us all together, because I really remember this one. And he said, okay, naval intelligence tells us that the Japanese are going to attack Midway here on the 1st of June with 4 carriers, 8 battleships, how many cruisers and destroyers. And as I remembered at the time, I said, after he said 4 carriers, I didn't remember too much of all the rest of the stuff, because I could think in terms of whoever got those guys, whoever found them with 300-mile-an-hour zeros, and we're doing 120 knots with a couple of 50s in the back, that wasn't going to be such a great thing. Furthermore, he said that whoever spotted the main fleet would track it and give the information, which is what we're there for. But the guys on each side would come over and help. So I said, let me see, that means 3 out of 12, so that's 4 to 1 is not too bad, but it isn't great. And then he really put the cap on. He said, well, everybody else will come back and land and load up with 500-pound bombs, and we'll go back out at a high-level attack. I said, high-level bombing attack? We can't hardly get up to 10,000 with 2,000 pounds of bombs on there. And so I thought, boy. And then I looked around and said, well, who's here to help us? I mean, who's going to fight it? Because we just had a few of the Marines were over there. And so for a few days, we weren't so sure how this was all going to come out. But then...
Papa Delta 232.
I know that that when I heard what our captain said, that who was going to come, I don't think, looking around, I don't think any of the guys, I had no feeling that any of the people were looking for a way out. They were going to do, or what is it? They were going to play the hand they were dealt.
Hello, Joe Kokoza here. Back in 1999, I got to do a story for Skin Diver magazine where I got to go to Midway Island for 3 weeks. While there, I timed my visit to be there during a reunion of veterans of the naval Battle of Midway in 1942. This included 2 PBY Catalina pilots, 2 naval aviators, Lee McLeary and Bill Cullen. I recently found some old DV tapes from the interviews that I did while on Midway Island, and I'll be posting them here in the podcast and on my YouTube channel. So if you really like what we're doing, please go subscribe to our podcast. Go to our website. We're on iTunes. We're on Spotify. Also, if you like the YouTube channel, please hit like and subscribe and help us out there. The PBY Catalina flying boat was a scout plane. It was also used for search and recovery. That, based on Midway Island, they went out in a arc pattern at 180 degrees, these scout planes, to search for the Japanese fleet that naval intelligence knew was coming to, 1, to launch an invasion on Midway, and 2, to draw the remaining American carriers into a naval battle where the Japanese thought they would sink them. The PBY Catalina was a versatile aircraft, not glamorous like a fighter or bomber, but it was probably one of the most important naval aircraft in World War II. It was used for, obviously, scouting for the fleet, usually from land bases, but it could land on water. It was also used for search and recovery. And it was so versatile that later in the war, they actually were strapping bombs to it and depth charges. And they had the Black Cat PBYs that they were using for night attacks on submarines and part of hunter-killer groups. So when I was on Midway, I got to interview 2 aviators, naval aviators who were in the battle, Lee McLeary and Bill Cullen. And they have a very interesting story. They were actually in 2 different PBY squadrons. Lee's PBY was the only PBY that was shot down in the battle. And when they crashed, 5 of the crew were killed, and Lee was the navigator, and he escaped with 4 of the crew members, and they were in a leaky life raft for 3 days before Bill, who's a navigator on another PBY, and it was like 3 days after the battle, actually found them, and they got rescued. So it's a really interesting story of courage and of the battle, something that's not in the major history books, because it's not the glamorous part of the war, but it's a really good story, and it was an honor to be able to talk to these veterans and meet them and get their stories while they were still alive. So without further ado, I'll let them tell you their story, and hope you enjoy it.
Lee McLeary in Unit VP 44. I was third pilot and navigator of one of the 12 planes, which was, in fact, our plane was number 12. We were all assigned, given sectors to go out and search out for 700 miles. And as Bill was saying earlier, Ensign Reed of our squadron had picked up 27 ships on the far limit of, in fact, it was past the limit of his search sector, and this was on the 3rd. And so the next, and that evening, why 4 planes came up from Pearl Harbor, additional PBYs, they refitted those with torpedoes to go out and hit this 27 ships, which was the first sighting of actually the force that was coming in. That happened to be not the attack force, but the transports, and guarding them were 4 heavy cruisers and a number of destroyers. That night, when they found, 3 of them found the 27 ships, the PBY that went out, then refitted with a torpedo, and one of the torpedoes went off and blew a damage to one of the was actually not one of the transport. I guess it was one of the oilers.
It was the oiler. It was for the
oiler, yeah.
Akabono Maru.
Yes.
That's what it was. Yeah,
and so they were quite stirred up then. They knew that we knew they were out there. And it was our fortune or misfortune the next day to draw that sector, the search. So while those 4 planes were returning toward Midway, why we were heading out. And of course, long before they got back, why they were told not to come to Midway because Midway was under attack. So they went on to Laysan Peninsula, I guess it was. They landed somewhere else. So, well, one of them ran out of fuel and landed open sea. But that's when the excitement started for us. We were about 250 miles out. We sighted 2 of the heavy cruisers, which I believe, according to the recognition book, looked to me like the Mogami and Makuma. They had, as soon as they were attacked, came in full speed all that rest of that night to hit fire on Midway. Well, in the meantime, there were 4 fleets out there, and Japanese fleets. There was that fleet, and then there was the attack fleet, the mobile fleet, with the 4 carriers, which had not been sighted as of yet until early in the morning. And we'd already taken off and was off for almost 2 hours before they were sighted. But as I say, we had drawn that sector to search. Well, it was like stirring up a hornet's nest, you know. And here they had been attacked. And so they got a hold of another fleet that was fitting in between, which had 2 seaplane carriers in it. And they sent against us 3 enemy planes. And they all arrived after we had sighted the Mogami and Makuma and were proceeding on west to find the rest of the ships. And we got into a air-to-air combat with these 3 fighters, and we believe that we got one of them, and the other 2, we fought with them. I had always said 20 to 22 minutes because my watch stopped. We started fighting with them at 7 o'clock, and my watch stopped, and after I was swimming in the water, I got a chance to look at it, and I don't know how much later this was. I'd been in the water for quite a while. My watch stopped at 7:22. Now, how long it took the watch to stop from the time I hit the water was what I was going by, the 22 minutes. The watch could have run for 5 minutes or more. I don't know how long actually we were in combat with these 3 planes.
How did you hit the water?
Well, they had hit the plane many times. In fact, 3 men were dead before we ever hit the water. We had 10 men aboard that morning. We had 1 extra man. And when...
Extra machine gunner? Or?
No, actually it was an extra pilot. And his name was Ensign Camp. He joined the squadron about 2 months after I did. And so he would have been in my place, or I would have been in his place or something. But in the same way with the co-pilot, and that's an interesting story in itself, but to make it brief here, what happened in our plane, there was this sudden explosion. I looked out of the nav port there, the small square foot window, and all of the ribs were exposed. The trailing edge, 7 feet of the wing, about, I'd say, 40% of the wing had blown off. It burned in this explosion. It detonated one of the bullets, or the exhaust or something, detonated all this raw gas that had been running into that section. And then it exploded. And when I looked out, as I say, I could see nothing but the ribs, and in the corners for about 3 inches was this small burning black fabric there. I knew we were going to go in then, and also the paint on, we were carrying 2 500-pound bombs under the starboard wing, and the paint started peeling on those from the fire. The gasoline was under that tank, the starboard tank, which was a non-self-sealing. The port tank was a self-sealing tank. That one held up. When he released those 2 500-pound bombs, of course that threw it off balance, and the port wing started to go down. And I looked out there when I saw that it had exploded, and raced forward, looked over the first pilot's shoulder, and I could see we were indicating 140 knots on about a 25-degree dive, and the port wing was down about 25 degrees and continuing to rotate downward. And I looked, and we were somewhere between 100 and 200 feet off the water. I knew we were going to hit in a matter of a second or two. I jumped down on the deck, my back up against the bulkhead, my knees up against my chest, and then the impact knocked me unconscious, because I didn't remember anything of the crash of the plane at that moment. How long it took this could have been anywhere from maybe half a minute to 2 minutes or something like that. I came to, I was in water about a little better than waist deep. I don't know where the nav table went or any of that stuff that went. I could see the sunlight coming through that side. The side had ripped completely open. There was about a 3-foot opening there with no stringers, no cables, no nothing there. No skin on the outside. And the bow was going underwater, and it was crumpled. The one pilot was dead before we hit. The other one was probably killed in that crash at that time, although he could have been hit too. I don't know. And midsection of the plane, the gasoline had been running down there, and it was just a wall of flame, so I couldn't go back, couldn't go forward. So God had opened up this side of the plane for me to get out. There's no question in my mind at all about that. In fact, when I put all of the factors, the incongruous factors together of that entire battle, the battle to the north and everything, the way everything harmonized to get in 5 minutes to hit 3 carriers that would destine them to go to the bottom, and then of course one later under almost the same circumstances, the plane's on the deck, and which no fighting crew with the experience that they had should have ever allowed such a situation to occur. And then, well, getting back now to where Bill comes into the picture here, he was the same squadron. The next day, of course, they were still doing mop-up. The third day, they sent out 3 PBYs, one from VP-23, which was a straight seaplane. Ours were amphibians. And so our planes were 1,500, 2,000 pounds heavier than the others. And he sent 3 of those out. Well, Bill was heading one of those out, and they had been searching for most of the day. And then what I was told, when the seaplane that was without the landing gear landed, a VP-23 landed to pick us up. And when I got on board and went up and showed the pilots the mirror what happened, we had just about the end of our tether, you might say. We were totally exhausted. No food, no water, no medical supplies. About 60 hours. And
So you were about 3 days. You were
yeah,
down
that was it.
on the 4th, and
Yeah,
picked you up on the 6th.
on the 6th, yeah.
One second, can we just face a little bit towards the camera?
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay. So the PBY 5, VP 23, landed to pick us up, and I had one of the emergency things that we had, and they were very scarce, was this chrome mirror, about a 4-inch chrome. It's just a piece of chrome mirror, and I thought as I saw the sun was a little lower than what we have here right now, was down. I thought, hey, this is an ideal situation to use that mirror. So what I did, I put my took the mirror in my right hand, put my left hand out as far as I could extend it, and was shining the reflection of the sun on this hand. Then I'd line the two up with a PBY that was going to pass us about a mile to our left. And then I'd drop that left extended hand and slightly oscillate that mirror. And then I'd recheck the alignment as he was coming around about every 20 seconds. And then I'd reline it up. And when he got to right abeam of us, well, I knew he had seen us, and because he dropped his port wing and came over and did see us up. And we'd been out twice on searches off of Hawaii there, off of Ford Island, looking for planes that were down. And when you're looking for something in the open sea, it's difficult to find. Well, then Stromae, who was the navigator on that 23 plane, I asked him, I said, where are we right now? We had gone down as I was navigating. I knew exactly about where we had hit. And we'd gone down 355 miles west of Midway. And he said, you're 405 miles out. So, and the wind was about the same all that time, about 15 knots from 110 degrees. And so that blew us in 60 hours, 50 nautical miles west. And so they were ready to give up the search. It was a little later than right now. They turned, and Bill was telling me later, and I didn't know this until 1995 when he was telling me about it in a reunion that we had, that he was navigating that plane, and he took a consensus of the crew and said, we've got to go back. It'll be dark before we get back to Midway. Which way do you want to turn, to the right or to the left? The crew all decided turn to the left. And if they'd have said the other thing, we'd have perished, of course. But they turned to the left, and within 10 minutes time after that turn, there they spotted us.
That's right. Yeah, you see what happened was that I didn't know, and I always wondered what happened to Whitman's crew with Lee in there, because what happened was that I don't know who arranged it, but I would think that our captain did arrange for 3 planes to go look for him, because this was the only PBY that was shot down in the whole battle, and it was ours. And so we knew what time he took off because they kept logs of that, and we knew what time he was attacked because my radioman in our plane, because we were on a different sector, gave me the time on it. Matter of fact, I have a copy of my radioman's log.
Down.
Yeah, where you guys were attacked, and of course we knew the sector that he was supposed to be on. So if we knew when he took off, and if he was on the sector and doing what he was supposed to do, we knew about where he was when he was attacked. So we went out there, and we didn't see anything. So my thinking was that if he's in a life raft 300 miles from shore, and if he can't swim for more than, if you've been swimming for a couple of days, forget it. So they have to be in a life raft, and if they're in a life raft, they can't go anywhere, they might as well go downwind. So my thinking was that we'll go downwind, hoping that the wind was about the same as it was for the last couple of days. So we spread out, went down over 100 miles. And as Lee said, we got down to the end, and Cox said, okay, which way do we want to go? And he said, we only have time for one sweep back. We either sweep this way or that way. And as Lee said, we raised a question about it, and I said, well, we might as well turn towards home. It's a 50-50 chance. So we turned left and spread out, and 10 minutes later we ran over them.
Wow.
And so those are, talk about the brakes. If we'd gone the other way, that would have been it.
One of the other things on that was the fact that before we started in combat, the after station reported that there were 3 enemy planes behind us. And so Whitman, our first pilot, he was class of 39, I believe, at Annapolis. He gave it full throttle, increased the RPM to maximum, and so we were flying at about 145 knots away, trying before these planes could catch us, and we flew for another 20 minutes or maybe 25 minutes. But we had turned. There was a huge cumulus cloud, the only cloud in the sky, that was off to our left and in the distance. And so we thought, if we can make it to that cloud, we can get in the cloud, and then we can because we got fuel to spare, you know. And so we were off course. We weren't on course, and we were to the left of our course. And I don't remember how many degrees. I knew at the time how many degrees we had turned. It wasn't a great deal. But we were south of where we were supposed to be. But the wind, being from 100 degrees, or 110 degrees, from the east, you might say, it was 110 degrees, and 90 degrees being due east, why, it was blowing us all this time more back to our original position. And as I say, Storm Air said that we were 405 miles out, so we had drifted these 50 nautical miles and further north to get closer to the point. Otherwise, if the wind wasn't the way it was, there's so many factors.
That's true. Well, also there were 10, as Lee said, there were 10 guys in the crew, and 5 got out, and he was one of them, of course. And one of them, Jack Camp, he was shot in the stomach. 3 of the 5 of you were shot. Yeah. And Jack Camp was the most serious, and he died that night. As a matter of fact, I had the duty, the honor, I guess, of representing the squadron in the burial at sea the next day on the PT boats. So Jack was one of the 6 people who were on the deck, and we went out through the channel, out to sea, and the Padre had the services, and he had a burial at sea. So I knew what happened to Jack, but I never knew what happened to these guys until we got together and had a few years back.
The rest of the war?
Well, the rest of the war, that's another story in itself. But what had happened?
Well, you were being an instructor, didn't
yeah,
you?
they sent me back to Corpus Christi, Texas, to instruct. And I couldn't stay alive out there, so they sent me back to instruct. Shore duty at that time during the war was maximum of 18 months. So at the end of the 18 months, why, they sent me to Jacksonville, Florida. And who's in charge back there but Bill Richards, our executive officer that took the midnight torpedo attack.
Of Jacksonville?
Well, no, not of Jacksonville, of all the seaplane. So he told me, he says, you've got a choice. You've got the PBYs that you're in, the PBMs, or the PVs. And I thought, a PV, there we got 2,000 horsepower per engine and a hot airplane, and closest thing, because I told the skipper after that, I said, being in that nav compartment, I can't see where they're coming from or anything else. I want to get into a fighter now. It's where I got my own guns and so on. So anyway, I chose the PV, and so I was flying PVs up until the end of the war.
I did too. And my second tour after the PBYs and down to the South Pacific and back again, we got PV1s, and we went back. We went back there again. Yeah, when of course the war had moved up, and we were up around Bougainville and Green Island and up to Emerald, flying up around Truk in those days. And then of course the war went on and left us. So I came back in the end of '44.
Oh yeah.
So you stayed on Midway after the battle?
Oh no. We went back. Everybody left. We went back to Honolulu, and I got graduated, if you will. I got my own crew, my own plane, and we flew patrol from Pearl Harbor until Christmas time. I'm sorry, that's not right. When we went back, we went over to Kaneohe. We flew out of Kaneohe until Christmas time, and then still VP 44. Then we went down south to Espiritu Santos, flew around Guadalcanal and that area until.
So you were involved in Guadalcanal also?
Well, just in the sense of our searching that we did, yeah. But we weren't a Dumbo unit. We were supplying the coast watchers and that sort of thing, but we didn't do the other. The Dumbo, that was a separate in the next squadrons. They found out that was a good deal. The Dumbos, they painted them black and they flew at night. but we were just doing the regular patrol, looking for the Japanese.
As they said, it was the blue cats to the black cats.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So when I came back, I came back at the end of my second tour was in July of '43, and I came back to the States at that time because I'd had 2 tours out. No, I had 1 tour. So when I joined BPV 148 and flew PVs and went back out and did it all over again for another year.
Where did you check out in PVs? Which
Vernalis.
station? Oh, at Vernalis. Okay.
Yeah, right over here, just outside
yeah.
of San Francisco.
How did you guys connect again for all these years?
Well, that was the fellow by the name of Jim Mills in our squadron wanted to get all the former ones that were in Midway together. So he started writing letters, and he passed on here a couple of years ago. But he was great. He got everything. I thought.
Which I have a copy of.
Yeah.
I got a copy of the book.
Yeah, I have a copy at home too.
Yeah. The only trouble is,
Title of the book?
The Blue Catalinas of World War II.
Yeah.
By James Mills is his name, and most of it's accurate.
Yeah.
But it's funny, the things don't match. You know, some different books, different things that we think about or think we know for sure. Somebody else looks at it from a different side. It's that old story about the elephant, you know, the guy that felt the elephant. Yeah. But at any rate, we tell it the best we can and as we saw it. And so I was very lucky and glad that we were able to get Jim on the other half of the crew.
How did you feel coming back to Midway?
Well, yeah, I don't know. It seems bigger than I remembered it. Things are a little different. And I've been looking around trying to see, we were on Eastern Island all the time, except for 1 or 2 days when we came over here.
Yeah, I never did get on that.
Yeah, I came over here 1 day, and the difference is, I guess, that well, you can look around and still think. That's why I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going over to Eastern Island, and we'll see what's going on over there. See what's left, what it was like, because. As being junior officers, if you will, in the squadron, I didn't know anything that was going on. We were just doing our own job, what we were assigned, and doing it the best that we could. And for example, when the squadron came here, ended up everybody here on the 23rd in Eastern Island. The captain called us all together because I really remember this one, and he said, "Okay, naval intelligence tells us that the Japanese are going to attack Midway here on the 1st of June with 4 carriers, 8 battleships, how many cruisers and destroyers?" And as I remembered at the time, I said, after he said 4 carriers, I didn't remember too much of all the rest of the stuff because I could think in terms of whoever got those guys, whoever found them with 300-mile-an-hour zeros, and we're doing 120 knots with a couple of 50s in the back, that wasn't going to be such a great thing. Furthermore, he said that whoever spotted the main fleet would track it and give the information, which is what we're there for. But the guys on each side would come over and help. So I said, let me see, that means 3 out of 12, so that's 4 to 1 is not too bad, but it isn't great. And then he really put the cap on. He said, well, everybody else will come back and land and load up with 500-pound bombs, and we'll go back out at a high-level attack. I said, high-level bombing attack? We can't hardly get up to 10,000 with 2,000 pounds of bombs on there. And so I thought, boy. And then I looked around and said, well, who's here to help us? I mean, who's going to fight it? Because we just had a few of the Marines were over there, and they had obsolete aircraft, which we knew, and the Brewsters and the SB-2Us. And so for a few days, we weren't so sure how this was all going to come out. But then by the 1st of June, then the B-17 showed up, the half a dozen TBFs showed up, more F-4Fs. The Marines got some better aircraft. They got SBD dive bombers. And then there was the B-26s. 4 of those showed up. Things were getting pretty crowded around here. And then we heard a rumor that maybe we had a task force out there. We weren't too sure. But then the things changed a little bit, that we weren't necessarily going to have to go out on a high-level bombing attack. So that made us feel a little bit better about the whole thing. And we were sharing, because we were doing a 180-degree search 12 hours plus a day. Every day we'd fly every day, 12 hours or so, 700-mile patrols each time.
And we'd stand the morning alert and the evening alert. And we would, and then coming in at night, well, first of all, the reveille was at 3 a.m. We'd get up at 3 o'clock, go down to our plane, warm it up, check it out. And then by that time was the alert was an hour before sunrise and an hour after sunset, because those in the knowledgeable positions figured this is the most critical time of an attack on the island. So we would get up at 3, as I say, and sit in that airplane until it got dawn, and then we would taxi out and get in line to take off for that day. And 12 to 13 hours later, we would land, and usually at that time get in the line with all the other PBYs and all the other planes that landed for gassing up again, because you always gassed up when you landed, so you're ready to go. And by that time, at least in the crew that I was in, we were oftentimes the tail end of that line. Too late to get the evening chow, and you only got a half hour, and you got to stand the evening alert. Well, that was till wind up about 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, there was one other thing that the refueling was a big problem, because about a week or more earlier on, in the latter part of May, they had booby-trapped the fuel tanks here, the big ones, the storage tanks. And while they were checking them out, we blew up our own fuel system, such that they had to ship in 50-gallon drums. And these guys had to fuel, like our plane, taking about 1,700 gallons. They had to fuel it out of 50-gallon drums. They had to hand pump it in, and that took a lot of time. And of course, the B-17s were using up gasoline that wouldn't quit. And so there really was almost a fuel shortage here towards the battle day. And the other thing I remember, the thing I really did not like, was the cold saltwater showers.
Oh, yeah.
We had to take saltwater showers because there wasn't enough fresh water for everything. So we had a little bit to drink and shave with, and that's it. And the rest was cold salt water. So anyway, those are the things to remember.
The conclusion that I came to after trying to put all of this together, lying there in the hospital and so on later on, why God had to have a part in this. He's the one that harmonized all of these incongruous parts to come together and have those dive bombers of ours in 5 minutes hit 3 carriers and destined them for the graves and so on. And Admiral Nimitz came around the morning after. We were picked up on the 6th, the night of the 6th, and then the next day ferried down to Pearl Harbor Hospital, and then the morning of the 8th. In fact, it was before, really, just after dawn, and it was early, before business had started. Down there, why, who's standing alongside my bed except Admiral Nimitz? And I told him, I says, God's the one that rescued me. I said, I wouldn't be alive today if he hadn't saved me. And he said, this whole battle was by the providence of God, the fact that we won. And that was what he told me. And I said, I certainly concur with you. And this is a message like Admiral Moore was talking about here, the difference between the culture today in America and the culture of what it was then is vastly different. I mean, the young fellows of today don't really know how rough it was. When I tell my daughter sometimes, we got together and she wanted to write a book on it, and which she did. And she said it's amazing of what it was then that she didn't know about, and she was born in 1952, the last of our children, and she said it's just so different than what it is. And even today, you see, all this is climaxing, and this in the 90s, this decade that we're in, has been more change and advancement. And this is since that time, and I got back at BOQ, I started reading the scripture, and life just jumped out at me. It was alive, and I started underlining almost everything. All of a sudden, it became real. Hey, this is what it said. And I was reading in there much later in the book of Daniel, and Daniel said that he was probably one of the foremost prophets in the scriptures and the book of Daniel, and the Lord appeared to him, told him to write these different things that would happen, and they've all come through. The four nations that would rule the world in the latter days. And then in another place he says that two things. He says in the latter days that knowledge would greatly increase and people would be running to and fro. And I was thinking when I came out to the airport last Sunday morning in a 6-lane freeway there, and this is at 7 o'clock in the morning, whole line of cars, just one after the other, buzzing that way, whole line of cars buzzing this way. They're certainly going to and fro. And then he told Daniel, he says, but close up that book and seal it until the end times. And that's what we're in now, the end times. I think we're coming to a climax. I think that the Lord Jesus Christ is going to reappear one of these days. And the thing that makes me think of it is the fact that when Jesus was on the earth, he told the Pharisees, supposed to be the religious rulers of the day, he said, if you die in your sins, you cannot go where I'm going. So God himself came down to pay the penalty for our sins, and then he leaves it up to us. Here it is. It's free. Free choice. You can take your choice, either believe him and obey him, and that part is just, I always call it an R&R. That is to receive Christ as your Savior, and then obey him. And that's the way that I kind of look at it now. And you can't, like the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. The only thing I can do is tell you the perspective from which I see it, and say, look, the thing that I'd like to do is see you in heaven. I know I'm going to heaven. I know that because I put my trust in Christ. I said, this is it, Lord. You dwell in my heart. I'll believe what you said. And so then he gives me an inner peace and inner assurance that it's right. And we do have a spiritual enemy, see, the devil.
Well, there's a lot of that going on, as you're probably aware. There's a lot of religions around, and they all have a lot of major tenets that are similar or the same. And so all I can say is that, Lee, that
How do you feel?
the good Lord had a hand on it.
Oh, yes. He
Do
definitely
you
got
feel
a hand
that this
here.
is kind of, with the dedication of this monument, the memory is going to of what you guys at Midway did is going to be?
I would like to think that it is going to be of some help. It's just like when you, I don't know whether you've ever visited, have you ever visited Washington, D.C. and been to Arlington Cemetery?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to determine whether or not a great deal of good comes from that. But I would hope that a lot of young people, and of course, after all, everybody's younger than we are,
No.
are thinking about that, and thinking about really the basic premise of our country and a democracy where people can express views like Lee has here. Others may not agree all the way, and they can go their route. And to allow that freedom for everybody to do that, I think that's really what it's all about. And that's what I feel we did at the time. I know that that when I heard what our captain said, that who was going to come, I don't think, looking around, I don't think any of the guys, I had no feeling that any of the people were looking for a way out. They were going to do, or what is it? They were going to play the hand they were dealt, and they were going to do it. And just as Lee was talking about the fact that the Hornet planes, that their attack force, they didn't see anything. They missed the whole program. And the other part, the Torpedo 8 guys, went in with no fighter cover. Now, let me ask you, what do you think they were thinking about when they showed up at the task force with no fighter cover, with an airplane that did about 110 knots with a torpedo on it? They did their job.
Survivor in the whole torpedo wave?
Yes, and we picked him up. Our squadron, Pappy Cole and Donaldson, picked him up on the next day.
So, why don't you talk about that, picking up Ensign Gay, I believe his name
Well,
was.
yeah. Well, Lieutenant Cole, the second day we were on a 300-mile searches to see what happened to the various parts of the Japanese fleet, to identify those that were damaged so that we could finish them off, if you will. And so we went out at 300 miles, and there were, I think there were 10 PBYs that day that were given sectors, and Pappy Cole was on 50 degrees north, which is where the burning carriers were. And they went out, and they, as according to the record, which I've been reading a little bit of, they and talked to the people concerned. There was a series of life rafts with survivors in them spread out, and then there was one guy at the end. And Cole said to Donald, "Okay, mark on the chart where this guy is, and we'll pick him up on the way back," because they had to finish their job, which was go out 300 miles, identify the people you saw, and come back, which they did. They encountered some. I've forgotten what the exact report was, battleships or cruisers, whatever. On the way back, Lieutenant Cole said, "Okay, Ralph, give me a course to pick up this guy." And so Ralph gave him a course, and I'll tell you, and that's very good navigating, because we had sun lines and dead reckoning only. No global positioning system, no Loran and all the rest of it. And he said they came right over this guy. Now, I don't know if you know how difficult it is to see a life raft, which is not much bigger than that round thing there, from 1,000 feet, and with waves and white caps and that sort of thing. Anyway, they ran over him and found him, and then they, again, because there is a big risk in landing in the ocean even with a seaplane, because if you dip a wing or you hit the wave the wrong way, you're going to be broken up and sink. Anyway, they talked a little bit about it, and they said, "Let's go get this guy." So they landed, and they popped a few rivets, bent a few struts, bent a few things, but they landed, and then with the deft maneuvering, they picked him up, because he'd been there for a couple of days, and he wasn't in very good shape, and they had to lift him into the ship, to the plane, and then they took off and came back, and that turned out to be Ensign Gay, sole survivor of Torpedo 8.
This idea of popping the rivets, as we called it, when you'd land in the open sea and hit the swell the wrong way and throw you 20 feet further in the air and come down and bang. Why, at the nav table, we had a pencil sharpener. See? We used to grab the pencil. We had a whole tumbler full of pencils. They were sharpen a pencil, stick it in where the water's sprouting up out of the water, and stick it in there.
That's right, yeah.
Sharpen another one, plug that one up, And
that's right.
Turned out we did have a sump pump on board the plane that we could start up.
Thanks, guys. You were really very helpful.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we took so much of your time. We rambled a little bit. You'll have to edit. You'll have to do a little editing, I'm sure, but that's okay. Okay.
And we'll see you guys over. We're going to be at Eastern Island tomorrow, so we'll see you
Oh,
there.
hey, great.
We're actually going to
Looking
be
forward
on the island first, videoing you guys coming in. You're coming in on a landing craft?
I don't know how we're going to get over that. Maybe
I know there's
over there, but I'm not too sure.
They have an old LCM,
Oh, they do?
and that's what you're going to go over
Oh,
there.
I didn't know that.
Right.
I hope I don't get seasick. Okay, I think we better go and have dinner.
Oh, I'm sorry we kept you so long.
Thanks so much, fellas.
Thank you.
Nice guy here.
You missed dinner now.